fantasy sports show. You are now listening to the Insight Fantasy Sports Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You are listening to the Inside Fantasy Sport Podcast, and I'm your host, the Supercoach Hawk, Rob Kennedy, sitting here with my good mate, the big horse, Mickie Dell. How are you, buddy?
Robbie, well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, still coming down off a high after last night, Robbie. How good was that?
Mate, I am still buzzing. I think I had one of those nights where I was just looking up at the roof and thinking, and what we were referring to is our interview with, how do we give him? AFL royalty, final specialist, just all-round legend of a bloke, Clay Smith from the Western Bulldogs. I tell you what, do yourself a favor. Even if you are a Supercoach enthusiast, anyone that has any interest in sport, AFL, or just humanity, go and listen to this interview, because mad respect and credit to Clay Smith for the journey that he took us on. I thought it was going to go one way and we went another. Then I thought we'd go that way and we came back again. And yeah, do yourself a favor. I'm not going to give anything away. Go and listen to it. I loved it. It was great. What an absolute night. And big shout out to Clay for giving us his time and his honesty. It was great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a ripping show. He's just a good lad, isn't he? Like it hasn't gone to his head at all. He's still the same bloke he was in East Gippsland all those years ago. Probably, if you went up and said g'day to him in the street, he'd just stop and talk to you. That sort of guy. Right. So, yeah, we thank Clay for jumping on, but we've got a few games of footy to get through, mate.
No, you're spot on, mate. If I had a debut like he did, and that was the only game he ever played, I'd be walking around bobbing my head all over the place, I tell you what. But welcome, everybody. If you haven't already, click subscribe. If you're listening to us on YouTube, you can see it there below. Click and subscribe. So much content coming your way. Don't forget, from an Inside Fantasy Sport podcast standpoint, we have an NRL podcast. We'll be kicking off our NBA podcast soon as well, which is going to be an absolute rip snorter. And then look out for possibly BBL coming when summer comes around. I feel like summer's not that far away, because I am still up in Kununurra at the moment doing a regional roadshow. I'm in the T-shirt. You're in the Snap Fitness hoodie. Blessed with the sunshine, because it's pretty cold everywhere else. It definitely is in Perth, and I'm pretty sure it is where you are, mate.
It's shit house at the moment. We've had 40 mils today. It's about 14 degrees outside, and it looks like it's going to rain until Saturday. So enjoy the sunshine.
Mate, so no better time than to dive into our podcast and bring everybody a bit of a wrap up from the last round. I did tell everybody, bye rounds equal moving rounds. And if you're listening along, you can't see my head bubble going along, but I put in a big 1973, which was a top 2% score, and moved me up 10,000 spots in the season ranking, which I'm really stoked about. Anyone who's been listening for a long time, thank you. Anyone who's just joined us, welcome. But those who have been listening to us for a while, they knew that you and I put ourselves in a bit of a hole come round one, but we have been climbing out. I'm looking at my next step to get myself into that top 10%, and my end-of-year goal is to get inside the top 5, and I think that is in track, and I think the bye rounds are going to help me. How'd you go, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Not as good as you, but 1894 was my score.
That's still good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Like, I think it was still top 10%. Would have liked a little bit more, but as you said, we're climbing out of that hole. After a couple of trades this week, I feel like I'm only one premium away from a premium side. So,
yep, love that. Yeah. Love that. And we'll dive into that. I think, look, we're going to go through the scores. We'll start with the Melbourne-Carlton game in a second. That was the big one for me, having the VC on Petrarca, which got me that good score. And we've got a few players to start talking about. It's a bit of a different one. A lot of the time we talk about the break-evens and who the rookies are coming through, or who the ones are on the bubble. I think there's a few interesting lower-price premiums, a couple of mid-price maniacs that some people might want to take a chance on. And at some point, we might even hit up. We don't talk about – well, actually, we talk about him probably too much. But Hamo's going all right with a pretty good team. I've had a look at his. I think we do need to give a bit of a perspective of someone who's sitting in that sort of top 2, top 1%, and where they're sort of starting to look at with their teams too. And that's what we try to do here, is bring you some different insights to where everybody's sitting, to what kind of risk v reward you need to take. But, mate, let's dive in. Melbourne and Carlton to kick off round 12. As I mentioned, Christian Petrarca keeps on keeping on with Clayton Oliver not in the side. That said, I think he's still having another rip snorter season. He pulled in the big 159. Bailey Fritz with a 112. Van Ruin is what we're hearing, or Van Royen, I should say. It's Van Royen. So he wants everybody to, have you heard that he wants everybody to start saying Roy instead of Rue? Even Brody Grundy or Max Gorn said, just leave it as is, mate. Let's just enjoy a bit of a chant.
Yep. Too bad.
Yeah, Max Gorn with a 103, Jakey Lever with 100. Couple of not great scores there. Brody Grundy with a 74. I'm trying to think. I know a lot of people sort of been looking at Christian Salem. He keeps sort of just putting around those 80s, so I'd sort of stay clear. Angus Brayshaw with a 92. And from a Cullen perspective, Adam Chera with a 129. Sam Doherty with a 96. Paddy Cripps only with an 89, even though he came flying out of the box with a big first quarter and first half, but he dropped off after that. And Adam Sard again sitting down around that 85. What'd you see in this one, mate?
Carlton lacks structure is what I see. Like I know we're not talking Supercoach and Supercoach scores here, but when you're talking structure and trust and belief in a game plan, Carlton just don't have it at the moment. Curnow and Mickie to an extent looked lost in front of goals. They're not clicking. And even though the Carlton president came out a couple of weeks ago, what's his name? Luke Sayers, I think his name is, came out and said, yep, I'm backing Vossi in. This is how it's going to be. They haven't won since April. May, nothing. And this is for a team that was billing themselves as a top 4 team at the start of the year. So it's a huge game for them this weekend. Not only is it against like my team, Essendon, and I don't think that Essendon are a top 4 side by any stretch, but if they get beaten against Essendon, coming into an informed Gold Coast team and then a stretch that they have against some good quality teams, Voss is on thin ice. He's got to start winning now.
It's normally the curse, isn't it, when the president actually comes in and backs you in? And look, it's great that the president comes out and does that, but at some point, if you keep losing, the walls keep getting closing in more and more and more. So I think we've talked about it many times that looking at that list should be performing better. It is. Assad's going to be an interesting one from a Supercoach standpoint. There's a lot of people, and I'm sure coaches don't listen to Fox Footy or anything like that too much, but when you get enough of a cry for them to handball the ball more to Sard and let him run it out of that back line, and a lot of people pointing out that they're just not doing that anymore, there does come a point where maybe that might start happening. So I think it's a bit of a finger on the pulse that if someone wants to take a bit of a risk, I still think Sard's somebody that you could jump on now with his price dropping a little bit lower, because Carlton's got to start listening to what the public is saying and the Fox Footy experts, because you've at least got to show them whether it works or not. So that's what I'd look out for.
Yeah,
for me, though, Paddy Cripps could be getting his move on orders come around 15 for me when they have the bye. That could be the move that needs to happen for me.
Well, there's a story that released today via Fox Footy and Sam McClure that said that there's a bit of unrest and some tension amongst some of the Carlton players as well, and that they don't like playing with each other. And I'm not talking about in a sexual way. I'm talking about on the footy field. So let's see what happens, like if there's no cohesion, if there's no, vibe that's there this weekend, it could spell disaster for Voss. And, 4 or 5 games left in the year. Is it then a trial to see who's going to be the next coach?
Yeah, mate, I think absolutely you need to have a look at it. 100%. The list is good enough. Mate, I wanted to leave that call alone, but I can't. If anybody's listening to this podcast and you thought he was making a sexual innuendo, you're on the wrong podcast. Move across. Anyways, I don't know what I can do with that in the way of a segue, but we move on to Port Adelaide versus my boys, Port Adelaide and the Hawks. And I tell you what, I had many messages from the boys about what was going on at halftime, and it was a schmozzle. But, first class to Port Adelaide, the way they played. But Hawks played a good second half. I know the game was over, so, look, you're not going to look into it too much. But it didn't turn out to be the huge blowout that it was looking like it could have been, especially with Port Adelaide. I think they were about 105 at halftime, which was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But Jeremy Finlayson, he finds a way to score big scores definitely against weaker sides. Hawthorn being one of those. So he put in a big 141. Todd Marshall with a 120. Dan Houston, he likes to score against the weaker sides as well with a 112. Zach Butters continues to be the main man in the midfield there with a 105, right next to his partner in crime, Rosie, with a 98. And your mate, Ollie Wines, toot, with a 95 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just anyone who's sort of underperforming, nothing major that stands out. Scott Lycett's always the interesting one that's going to be looked at with a 74, and whether Bryn Tickle gets another go. Hawthorn perspective, Carl Amon against his old side with a 111, Jarman Impey with a 105, Warple with a 91. Anyone who kind of held on to Weddle is getting their money's worth with a 90. Mitch Lewis continues to perform, and people who are holding on to Will Day was super efficient, but he only pulled in an 81. So I know a lot of people are starting to look to make the move on Mr. Will Day.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we need to move on from Will Day yet. He's getting the numbers. Like Carlton are moving the pieces around, yes, but he's going to go back into that midfield. He's going to be that outlet, that receiver, the one who uses the ball. So I'm holding him. I have him. I'm holding him, and I expect him to get back around 100, 110 again shortly. In regards to other Hawthorn players, I'm not really looking at anyone else to bring into my side. Warple's very up and down. Who's your mate? The nuggety bloke in the middle?
Yeah, Newcomb dropped off. He had only a 53 in this game. So this is what we talked about with. He's consistently going above 100, but without a huge 140 type game, but has the ability to have a game like this with only a 53.
For sure. So that's that maturity, and that's why you'd be starting to look at him next year. It's still it's his first full year of footy, isn't it? He came in as a rookie mid-season draft last year, played a few games, and now, so another pre-season, I think you'll start to see a little bit more consistency out of him.
I think
in regards to Port Adelaide.
Yeah, sorry, mate, you go. I think it's his second year of footy, but it's his first year of having. It's definitely his first year of having more expectations on top of him. Okay. Absolutely. So he's got that. He's got that expectation now. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's just a bit of maturity, and definitely one that I will be looking at next year.
For sure. In regards to Port Adelaide, Finlayson and Houston, they scored well here, but you nailed it. They only scored well against ordinary sides or not very good teams. Rosie, Wines, and Butters are probably three consistent ones now. Wines, not to the extent that I'd like him to be, but he's still pumping out. He's between 92 and 110 each week, which, that'll do for me for now. There's no one really else that I'm looking at. If you've got Horn Francis, it's time to move him on. And Scotty Lycett, I don't know why he was subbed out. You got anything there?
No, I have no idea. I haven't looked. Yeah, I think maybe are they doing a St Kilda Royal Marshall type thing? The game was in the bag. Maybe they are. I think they're starting to realise that the finals intentions are there. So I haven't heard about an injury. So I'm assuming they just did a safety rest and believe that he's the guy that needs to be in the ruck if they're going to have success come finals time.
There you go.
That's an assumption. If somebody might come back to me. If anyone does, let me know if he's had an injury, but I haven't seen it. So, yeah.
So, for me, anyway, before we move on, I thought it was strange that he got subbed off so early, given that he's just made his way back into senior footy, and that you'd be probably looking to try and get a full game in, even like it's not higher end, your higher expectations, get the Ks in the legs, get that match fitness. So, from my point of view, it was a bit strange that he got subbed out so early.
It was good to see. Sam Mitchell take a bit of a risk, and look, he can because there's no pressure on him. So they pulled the trigger on their sub early too. Lloyd Meek got pulled very quickly, and Mackenzie came on as a sub and used it to its true structure, which it is a tactical sub, which they looked at and felt like they just had no run against Port. And they thought, look, we've got to pull our ruckman off. We've got two of them, and we'll put a bit more run on. And look, they won the last half, 11 goals to 7. So I'm not saying Hawthorn are anywhere near the side that Port are, but at least they came out and had a pretty good crack. And I love the culture that seems to be happening back at Hawthorn again.
Yeah.
West Coast v Collingwood. Now, look, this ended up being a 10-goal win, but there was a point in time there where the West Coast Eagles came out and put a little bit of pressure to Collingwood, remembering that pretty sure West Coast were the team that knocked them off last year as well. Knocked off Collingwood even though they went on that run. So interesting game to watch. Turned out to be a 10-goal win, as I said, to Collingwood, as it probably should be. Elliot Yeo, mate, he looked great with a 125. We knew that he can perform at this type of level. It's just whether the risk of his injuries and where his body's at. Dom Sheed, look, he had a 43 disposal, 119, which again shows that he does butcher the ball a little bit. Tim Kelly with a 115, Bailey Williams with a 110, Duggan with a 106. I'm loving the look of Noah Long, and I've still got him, and he pumped out an 85, which helped me with my score this weekend. I think he is actually a real nice little smoky pickup for them. From a Collingwood side, Tom Mitchell just seems to be one of the best pickups of the year, and he's just going about it pretty quietly with all the other hype that's going around with Collingwood. He got a 132. Nick Dacos with a 123. Look, probably got the 3 votes in this game as well. Taylor Adams with a 109. Darcy Cameron, which is someone that we need to talk about, with a 105. And Brody Myercheck with a 105 as well. Your thoughts, mate?
West Coast got back to within, 10 points at one stage there, and it looked like it was on, but then Collingwood just blew them apart. So, yeah, Darcy Cameron, 470,000 forward ruck, could be a really nice option at the back end of the year, especially if injury hits at the wrong time.
The one thing I'll tell people about that, though, he's got his break even still at 81. They play the bye. They have the bye, I should say, the week after. So for me, you don't need to go and grab him now. Even if he pulls in 100, he's not going to project that much in price from where he is. He's at 458,000. For me, he's a hold, and I'm going to watch him and look where it's at after the bye round. He could be one that I really look to bring in from round 15 onwards. So yeah, I was talking. He was one that I was talking to Ryan Hemo about, and I think the 1 week wait for me, I don't have to run that risk, but definitely a watch as we move forward. I think the only other one is DeGoey. I think it has to be talked about, even though people ask for it to be not talked about so much. Got his 3 weeks. Who was it? It was a player who just came out. I saw it just get posted recently. It was interesting to see. I love when other AFL players come out. I don't think it was a current player, maybe a past player. It'll come to me later. He wrote, great, he's copped his 3 weeks. Let's all move on. We've been talking about this too much. And probably rightly so. I think Jordan DeGoey is getting a bit talked about here too much, and probably in a harsh manner. Dumb decision. Took the guy on the head. Take your 3 weeks. Maybe sometimes we've got to let people go. We hang people out to dry too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's today's day and age, isn't it? And the way the media works. If they can find something to give you a bit of nasty stuff about, then they're just going to do it, aren't they? So it's done. He's got his 3 weeks. I think he's been unfairly dealt with because of his past. I think if it was a clean skin, so to speak, or someone that hadn't played up in the past and this was a once-off, it would never have generated this sort of noise. So, he'll have his 3 weeks off, which will be 4 weeks because Collingwood have the bye. He'll be primed for finals. So if you've got him, it's probably time to drop him because you're going to drop too much coin. But, yeah, moving forward, I think ideally for his body and for Collingwood, it's a break for him.
Do you know what I think the biggest story is? And it did get talked about a little bit. And being an ex-player and ex-coach yourself, look, we don't want anybody to go outside the realm of what's legal. But it was a statement there that came out from West Coast, which was it was disappointing to see the West Coast Eagle players not wave the flag for their player after it happened. We're talking about a young player here who's only come in for a handful of games to get hit in the head like that, which we all know was a bad call. Some would say bring in red cards. But no one got in there. No one got in there and really waved the flag for him. What is your take on that? From a let's go. If you're a coach, put your coach hat on. What is your take from that? Terrible.
If you see one of your teammates get knocked down, I don't think it changes if you're a coach or whether you're a player. If you see a teammate get knocked down, he's a teammate of yours. You've got to look after him. And if you not so much him, but your teammates as well, you got to fly the flag, so to speak. So even if it's just a bit of a push and shove and call him an idiot or a dickhead or whatever, and then it goes for 10 or 15 seconds and you move on, so be it. Like in the AFL, no one's going to swing a punch. In local footy, that might change and you might get a few sneaky ones in, but, that's footy. It's a contact sport. So for West Coast not to go across and remonstrate or to let DeGoey know that he messed up and that his teammates had his back, disappointing. And West Coast have come out and say that, the players, the coach. So I doubt that'll happen again, but that's pretty poor form.
Do you know what it shows me, though? Is it shows me they don't have that player. Now, I know there's a few out. I could name a few who would be that player. Luke Shuey would have definitely got in there. Shannon Hearn at the time was already injured and off the ground. He would have got in there. I can't think of it. Elliot Yeo doesn't do it. Dom Shee definitely doesn't do it. Like, everybody raves about this goal. I've watched him from the stands that many times. He rags at his players when they don't give him the football, even though he's not in the best position to get it. They don't have that player. If I went through the list and ran off the team names to you, I reckon you could give me 2 names just like that. That would be the players that come in. Tom Papley from Sydney, Braden Maynard from Collingwood. They're the ones that are coming in and waving that flag. And as a young player, you need to know that you have those players in your team to have your back. So, yeah,
100%.
Disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
We move on. Who is next? I've just had a bit of a change of screen. Give me 1 second. It is Western Bulldogs versus Geelong. Who'd you tip in this one, by the way, before we get into the stats?
Yeah, I tip the Dogs. Yeah,
I'm really mad at myself. I went with the trend, and I genuinely thought Geelong would get up, but I still think it's a game that the Doggies should have won. You might be able to fill in some more gaps here, mate. I didn't get to watch this one as much. Caleb Daniel, you might have to fill in for me with a 169. Tim English with a 156. Treloar with a 131. The miracle man who came back from snapping a hamstring supposedly in his head to coming back out and having a rip snorter. Tom Liberatore with a 122. Bailey Dale, a 116. Bontempelli with a 113. Jack McRae, who's now the DPP mid forward, with a 108. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players getting a ton. Compared to Geelong, Tom Stewart, 127, Jeremy Cameron, 107, Blick Vast with a 106, and Nevitt, the young rookie, with a 103. Did you watch this game fully, mate, or where were you at?
Nah, not much of it, but from what I did see, Caleb Daniels taken over Johanneson's sort of running role down back, and they're looking to get the ball in his hands, but it's being shared between him and Bailey Dale. So Bailey Dale has, to an extent, got his role back now. And it's like it was 2 years ago when both of them were scoring quite high. So if you can bring Caleb Dale in, I would recommend you do it. You can see through this game, yes, the Western Bulldogs lost by 4 goals, but they've still got 7 people over 100, and that's Daniel, English, Treloar. You probably wouldn't touch Treloar because his hamstring could go in any second. Libba, Dale, Bontempelli, and McRae. So you got 6 of that 7 that I would quite happily have in my team for the rest of the year.
Yeah, so Caleb Daniel now sits at 582,000. He's got a break even of 53, which is nice off the back of that score. He plays that role well. And I think this is probably a bit of a dilemma at the Doggies, which is they've got too many guys that can do that role well. And they've got to start looking at who that is. And they did it once. Johannesson started playing forward. It was a very different role for him. And Daniel went back, and they did it with Dale. And then JJ's gone back and they moved Caleb Daniel out. So it's a bit of a dilemma because you can't have too many that do the same role. So, look, right, if he's consistently going to play it, he's someone that people need to look at because I think he does it better than most players for sure.
Mm-hmm. Spot on.
We move on. Next one being Gold Coast versus Adelaide. And what a flip-flop game this one was. I only sort of saw the scores here and there. Adelaide were all over them to start this game, and then it was just Gold Coast after the first quarter, just absolutely rolling. Jack Lukosius continues to find the goals with a 132. Noah Anderson with a 120. Matty Rao, the clearance specialist, a 101. Humphrey, I'm stoked that I've got him in the side and took the chance. He looks good with a 99. Jared Witt's a 99. Ben King a 99. From an Adelaide perspective, Fogarty with a 126. Laird with a 112. Dawson, the unicorn, with a 106. Ben Keys is a big talking point, and a lot of people talking about him and bringing him in, showing that he's had 2 tons in a row, so he got a 106. Interested to get your thoughts, firstly, on the game and the players, and what's your thoughts on a Ben Keys, who's now a mid-forward valued at 369,000, and he's just only started to show that he's getting some midfield time, and because of that, he's had a 102 against Brisbane and now a 106 against Coast.
Yeah, it's a big risk with Ben Keys, but you've got to have the agates to be able to win the prize, don't you? So if you don't have the coin and you need to make a move, he could potentially be that forward premium towards the end of the year. He didn't score very well early on because he was only playing forward. He wasn't getting any midfield time, but now he's got that midfield time. So I reckon you might find that those scores continue. I was riding Gold Coast hard in this game purely because at the start of the year, I copped a bit of slack for saying that Gold Coast were going to make finals, and everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people were like, nah, they've got no hope. They're still 2-3 years away. They've got the list to be able to, they're not going to give it a shake, but just to make the finals, they've got that belief there now. Like, they were 6 goals down at one stage here, and a Gold Coast team of last year or the year before, if they had have lost by 6 goals and just kept it even after, halfway through the second quarter, they would have been happy with that. But the fact that they came back, they won, and they look good doing it, I still think they can play finals.
From everything I hear, Stewie Dew is a fantastic coach. I hear that Stewie Dew is a fantastic coach, and I think it's very. People go, "Oh, hold on, you've hung Vossi out to dry because they're not getting wins, and Gold Coast haven't been getting too many, and we didn't hang him out to dry." But from everything I hear, he's a fantastic coach, and I think if you take a look at the two lists, from what he's doing with his list versus what Vossi's doing with his, I think that speaks volumes to me. So he stayed strong with the Lukosius call playing forward, even though all the Supercoach enthusiasts know that he gets more points when he's in the back line, no different to a Himmelberg. But look, Lukosius is really finding his niche up there, and credit to him because he had a few people coming at him. You go.
He's playing as that third tall, so he's getting a smaller defender, but he can rove the ball, like he can play as a small as well. Really, really like what they're doing with Lukosius up forward. I want to say, just while you're talking about coaches and coaching styles, Carlton on one hand look lost. Their game plan is confusing. There's no trust and belief in each other versus Gold Coast. Yeah, they haven't had the results, but they genuinely look as though they enjoy playing footy with each other. They've got a structured game plan, which looks pretty easy to follow. Everyone's on board with it. They don't have the list that Carlton do, but yet they're getting better results. And that's a result of playing better as a team. So the proven fact that a superstar team will beat a team of superstars, proof in the pudding right here. You put Gold Coast forwards, Casbolt, Lukosius, Humphrey to an extent. Who else you got? King versus Mickie, Curnow, these sorts of players. Carlton, on paper, have a much better forward line, but the cohesion and the trust in each other that Gold Coast have, that's the big difference in the simplified game plan.
I'm not gonna name no. Look, I love this chat. Sorry to everyone if they're here just for Supercoach stats. We'll continue on, but I feel like too many people have got into Mickie just because he's missing goals. I think there are so many other underperformers in that forward line.
There is.
Now, I don't want to hang out young players or anything like that, but the young fella up there, small forwards, not doing enough. Silvani is not doing enough. At least Ben Mickie is doing the hardest part. He's clunking it. The clunk is the hardest part. He'll fix the kicking. But we're hanging him out because he's missing the goals. He'll get there, but you need more than just the two. I love how you named off the names at Gold Coast, and they're not as good as the Carlton names, but at least we can run off a few names that are actually performing. The other thing we haven't talked about is they played all last season without Ben King, and they're playing most of this season without Touk Miller. They get this whole side back together and flowing in what's working. I reckon they've moved more magnets this year than anyone. If they actually work out what that team looks like, mate, your top 8 core from this year, which I look forward to getting my bolters at the end of the year, might not be a bad one for next year. And because I'm a good bloke, I might let you double down. So we'll see how we go.
Beautiful.
Anyways, my only final call, because we talked about Ben Keays, my only concern with Ben Keays is they have the bye coming up, so it's only one more round. They have West Coast, which is nice. He's going to go up in cash. The one thing is they play Collingwood the week after that. Does he go back to playing a forward tagging role on Nick Dacos? I think he's the right player to do it, which means he doesn't get the midfield time, which means he doesn't quite free flow, which for me makes me want to start looking at taking a risk on a Nat Fyfe, which is 100K less than Ben Keays, and just see what cash he can get me through the bye rounds before I make some big moves after that.
That's not
thought.
Absolutely. But after the Collingwood game, I'm just rolling through some games here. They have North Melbourne. They have GWS. They have Essendon, GWS, and they have Melbourne. So that's a fairly good run for them.
For me, though, it comes down to I actually don't give a stuff who they play. It's does he play in the midfield? So I need to go and speak to some people. Or if you're an Adelaide listener out there or have been watching it religiously, and look, I'll go put it out on Twitter. Please hit me up. I need to know, why has this change happened, and is he going to stay in the midfield? So somebody just needs to feed me that information. And look, we'll bring it back to the podcast for sure. GWS versus Richmond. What an absolute rip snorter. I've got a work colleague who is a Richmond fan. And when your team's not a great team, so my team this year, obviously the Hawks, not a great team this year, you kind of start living vicariously through others, and I really enjoy it. So I see Richmond having an absolute close game. They've had so many close games this year. And I start getting on the text to him, how you feeling? How's the heart? Where are we at? And all those kind of things. And it kind of just brings that love into different games, and I really enjoy it. So it was nice to see them get up because they've got down in a few. But look, 104 to 110 in favour of the Tigers. Briggs, 128. He has made me, I'm just going to click on it right now. Anyone who jumped on the Briggs train, he has made you $86,000 in technically one game. And he still sits with a break even of minus 32 with a projected score of 91 to get you possibly another $55,000. He could be up there, and I'm intrigued to do the maths, and I'll do it before my next podcast. I reckon he'd be close to getting you quicker dollars than what Sheasel did, and we went nuts for Sheasel at the start. So he had an absolute ripper again from a Supercoach standpoint, coming in with a big 128, if I've counted that correctly. I just lost my stats on my sheet. It's there, 128.
No, you got it. Yep.
Callum Ward with a 116. Bedford with a 112. Himmelberg's gone back, everybody. Ring the siren. I've heard he's playing a little bit back in defence with the 103. So everyone's putting them on a watch list again. Whitfield's found the footy once more with 98. Callahan with a 92. Green dropped with an 89. That's Tom Green. And Canelio with an 81. From a Richmond perspective, Nankervis, again, just having a really consistent year with a 114. Jack Rewalt could be his last year with a 114. Taranto keeps finding the footy with a 111. And Short with a 103. Thoughts, mate?
Nick Haynes is still out. Himmelberg went back. As soon as Haynes comes in, he goes forward. So for those of you looking to bring Himmelberg back into your side, don't. You heard it here first on the Insight Fantasy Sports podcast.
Do we know how far Haynes is? Have we got any word on that?
Potentially next week.
Don't touch.
Yep. So this was perhaps the best day of footy that I've watched in I don't know how long. This game was an absolute cracker. Like the lead changed hands so often in the last quarter. It was goal for goal. Everyone was up and about. I feel sorry a little bit for GWS because they deserved to win it in the end. And just Marlon Pickett kicked the goal at the end. And what did he do? He ended up getting himself 40 points just by kicking that goal at the end. So
I love Supercoach like that. I reckon it's great.
He was on 31. I've got notes here. 31 with 3 minutes to go, and ended up on 70. So there you go.
Does that mean I'm intrigued? You might know the answer. Sorry, and this is a question without warning. Would have Briggs got more points if they won? Would have that been considered a game? Do you get extra points for a game winner, or is it just the go-ahead goal within the last couple of minutes?
It depends on scale, but I don't know. But when he kicked that goal, he went to 130.
He kicked two late, didn't he? To put him up each time.
Kick one late. He kicked one during the game, and then one out of like a stoppage type scenario. But he was really, really good. I know people are saying, "Oh, Matt Flynn, he's going to come back," but I don't think he does.
Why? Why would he?
No.
What did Matt? And look, and you and I are really big on this. We talk about this a lot. There's Supercoach, and there's still in real life. We've talked about Aaron Hall. There's Supercoach, and there's in real life. So, but I think in real life, Briggs is playing well. He's actually playing good footy
against who I would consider a top 5 ruckman in the AFL in Nankervis. And he was bodying him up at every opportunity, trying to run through him. He played a good ruckman's game. I can't see Matt Flynn coming back after that.
Yeah, I don't think there's a reason to do it. I think the team's playing well. There were some absolute classic snap of his tap work as well, which was great to see. And that's what
Really
you want
good.
your ruckman doing that. You want your ruckman taking marks, and that's what he was doing. So, yeah, look, and you talk about being a ripper of a game, a ripper of a day of footy. The Bombers versus North Melbourne turned into a game that we didn't think it was going to be, especially at the start. I won't name names. It's a name we don't mention, but he dropped a mention in the chat pretty quickly of North Melbourne are woeful from the first 5 minutes. And let's be honest, credit where credit's due, they were. But if I was a North Melbourne fan, which a few of them were in the chat, if I was you, the Bombers fan, I would have said, don't drop that in there now. The curse has been set. And from that moment, North came back with an absolute flurry. And this turned into a ripper, mate. I'll let you take us through this one. Let's change it up. You take us through the game.
Merritt was on 81 at quarter time. He was flying and then ended up on 137. So still a pretty good game. Nick Martin, wowee. He's just awesome. And he has come on more than what I thought he would this year. Like I remember saying early on that I thought Merritt, Parrish, and perhaps Ridley/Redmond were the only Supercoach relevant people. I stand to be corrected. This guy's a gun. And Supercoach relevant as well. Ridley, back to almost his best. His intercepting marking was really good, 102. Guelphy, 100. He's not Supercoach relevant. Please stay away from him. Langford, Caldwell, Heppel, all round 90s. Heppel, 83. But Redmond, 72, continues to frustrate people. North Melbourne, pardon me, after that first 10 minutes, they were really good. And I've got the messages here. I messaged Justin after those messages, and I said, North Melbourne have actually done all right to withstand the first 10 minutes and not get it blown out even more. They'll come back here. And sure enough, this one was a ripper game, and I was pretty nervous myself. Phillips continues to play well, 116. That's back-to-back tons for him. Mickie, 109. I hope Essendon chase him. I hear he's on the market. We need a big-body defender. If you're Xavier Campbell or whoever it is at Essendon now, go and get him. I reckon he'd be great with us. Zerha, the bull himself, 93. Goldstein, 94. Pardon me. Taron Thomas. Did you watch his game? 89.
I must admit, and I don't have any problem admitting fault or where I've sort of fallen down, and someone who has a podcast, I should have been on top of this a little bit more, but I didn't know he was back. I look, I've been away for work. I'm up north. I was watching the game, and I remember sitting there going, is that Taron Thomas? And he's playing all right. And it was. And in my mind, I was like, can you correct me as well? Has he changed numbers? Is he okay? Something was not, it didn't look right. And then I was like, that's Taron Thomas. I didn't know he was back, and he looked like he slotted in well. Look, I don't know what's going on massively externally. I'm not going to judge there. Let's not even talk about it. I'm just going to talk about his on ground performance. He slotted in well, and somebody that people probably need to have a little look at. I think you leave him alone. He was just up forward in this game a bit. But yeah, look, he helps that team a lot. Talent is talent.
He was that nice link between play, and he looked different because he looks fit. Like I genuinely believe that, like, he's realised that he's messed up. He's gone away, worked at his craft, worked on his fitness, and he looked really good. So that off-field stuff aside,
you always want to see somebody have another crack and sort of be able to get in. And if they're sorting out the other stuff, good on them. He slotted into that team extremely well. I think he was playing well, and North Melbourne had a real dip, mate, for sure.
Yeah, they did. Now Hall, obviously, Brett Ratton didn't see our last podcast telling him to piss him off. He's burning Zeeble and he's burning Sheasel. Get him out. Piss him off. We've got no time for him. I'm doubling down. He looks fat. He looks unfit. I don't care. Piss him off. Jesus. He's frustrating. He gets the cheap kicks. He doesn't do anything that warrants being an elite AFL football player. You know that the North Melbourne Kangaroos are rebuilding. Play through Sheasel. Play through, like, Scott even, or, like, Wardlaw. He's got so much talent. But I feel like Hall's playing for his career, and it's not going to beat North Melbourne.
Yeah, look. I know when we make these snippets, we only kind of get one of our faces on the screen each time. We just want to say that we don't fat shame here at Inside Fantasy Sport, and maybe you know what? Maybe we do, but where they don't is Snap Fitness 24/7 Epsom Bendigo. So get down there, get yourself in good shape. I don't know what else to say to that. I'll leave it alone.
No.
I think you're right. Though. If I want to bring all seriousness to the comments. Yeah. What's difference between Ratton and Clarko? If we want to talk let's actually talk from a Supercoach standpoint, is Ratton doesn't chip anywhere near as much as Clarko does. So Clarko, there's a lot more chip. Ratton, there's not. And that's another thing that's probably changing the guard of Zeeble and Sheasel and things like that. Sheasel's gone in the midfield. It's probably the right move for Sheasel to get in that midfield and get amongst it. I think he needs to actually move into a midfield forward. I think they're getting a nice little mix there with Phillips and Simpkin and Sheasel and Wardlaw, and they have to start playing those guys in there now to get some cohesion, get 50 games together and build it up, do a bit of a Sarong and an Andrew Brayshaw type thing. So yeah, look, I guess you got to find that balance between which mature age players and which ones not. Cunnington seems to be that one that's definitely losing his spot now. So yeah, they've got a bit of a challenge on their hands, but I think they've got something to work with there. The Fords and the Wardlaws and the others are coming in. They look pretty good. So yeah.
Don't lose trust in Eddie Ford or Eddie Mazda, as we call him. Mazda being the major sponsors of North Melbourne Footy Club. He just had a game where everything was going the opposite flank to where he was. It was dropping short of him. It was going over his head. Games like that happened. He's a rookie. He'll learn from it. But he is Supercoach relevant because he's going to make you money still.
Yeah. Shout out to you. Well done there. I mean, North Melbourne will appreciate that comment for you. I mean, I don't know if our NRL podcast co-host in Matty O'Brien, who runs a Ford dealership up in Queensland, will like it so much. But hey, this is the AFL podcast, and we'll say whatever we goddamn well want to. So yeah. Right. Mate, look, great calls, great shout outs. I think one we have to touch on from a Supercoach standpoint is the Zeeble question. You don't have him, I do. He's set to lose about 35K this week. I think it is time to move him. When you've got I think even if a projected score of 96 loses you 35K, make the move. For me, I think he's not a keeper anymore. You don't know when Clarko's coming back. You don't know when these changes are happening. It's very clear that he's not going to play the exact same role. Let's move him on. As I talked about off the top of the show, Fife's the one that I might look to bring in just to make myself some cash and get me through the bye rounds because they've already had their bye, and we know that he's going to go in the midfields. Look, even if he averages me in the 70s or 80s through these bye rounds, I'll take that. I'll get the cash and I'll move on and upgrade to a primo. That's my take. And I think it might be the only trade I do this week. So I can make some really big moves in round 14 and 15 and have some trades up my sleeve to finish off the season. Gotcha.
Yep, I agree. Like this week, again, only Gold Coast and Geelong have the bye. And then we've got a wide variety of Adelaide, Collingwood, Essendon, Hawthorn, Melbourne, West Coast with the bye the preceding round. So that's when we start to hit, 6 teams at a time, bye rounds. Remember, it's your best 18. Prepare properly, otherwise prepare to suffer.
Yeah, for me, I think people need to have a really good look at some of we were talking about it earlier, some of the low price premiums now who've come down a bit. And I'm talking about the Callum Mills, the Darcy Camerons, the Patrick Dangerfields, who are going to start coming back into some sides soon. Even Lachie Neale has possibly dropped a little bit in price as well. Let them play their bye first. Let them get through their bye. And when do you start to bring them in? So for me, those are some big names that are on my watch list. Don't rush it too hard. Don't make primo sideways moves just yet. Let the bye rounds play out. Get your 18 on the field. Get your score. And then move on from there. And we'll touch on that. I think there's some big moves to be had before we get through these next couple of rounds.
For sure.
Beautiful, mate. Any final words for you? I think that's a really good wrap. I think if we start to maybe look forward to next week, if we have a little sneaky look at it, round 13 C's, what do we got? Sydney versus St Kilda, Western Bulldogs versus Port, Hawthorn versus Brisbane, Adelaide versus West Coast, Fremantle, Richmond, North GWS, Carlton, Essendon, Melbourne, Collingwood. What an absolute rip snorter that last round will be for the Kings' birthday. This is the bye round where, if I'm right, it's only Gold Coast and Geelong that have it. So what are you sort of looking at for your team, mate?
It could potentially be a hold this week for me. I've got 18 players, 18 decent players that will score. I'm sitting on 11 trades left, so I don't have a lot of trades left. It might be, I hold this week and trade next week when I potentially need to, and especially for round 15 where I'm only looking at having 14 players at the moment. So, yeah, it's a wait and see for me. I do want to give a shout out to the TPJs and Coach Joseph with a round score of 2,090. He is the winner of our Molten Fantasy Pod Supercoach League for this round. So, Joseph, if you're listening in, send us a DM via Twitter, mate, and we'll send you your prize pack, all courtesy of the Standard Squeeze.
Beautiful. It's a fantastic pack. One that I'm missing. The glass just doesn't cut the mustard compared to the 4-1, if I'm being honest. But it's definitely not as cold. I have to drink him too quickly, and that's not a drink responsible type attitude. But yeah, for me, like I've said it once, I'll say it twice, and I'll say it again now. So for me, I think it's just going to be the Zeeble to Fife move. I will go have a look at a Ben Keys. I like the fact that Fife now finishes out all the buys. He's already had his buy. I know he's going to get the playing time. That leaves me with 10 trades, but 382,000 in the bank as well, which allows me to make some really structured moves in round 14 and 15, not to only have my 18 players on the field, but also restructure my side to finish off the year. And that might mean some moves like Paddy Cripps might get moved on in round 15, and I'll have a really good look at. I'll be watching some players very closely this week, the Darcy Camerons and what that sort of looks like for whether they're going to come back into my side or not.
I've just had a message from a mate who's associated with the Melbourne Football Club. Clayton Oliver has been sent to hospital because of the infection in the blister, and he's on an IV drip and potentially out this weekend as well. So News breaking right here on the Insight Fantasy Sports Podcast.
I feel like we might have to go and even drop that quicker on Twitter because we might probably not drop this podcast till tomorrow. So, yeah, let's make sure we get that out. We drop everything as quickly as we can. That's some great insights from you, the big horse. We expect nothing less. Mate, any final words from you?
No, that's it. Looking forward to this weekend. Another big round of footy. Save your trades if you can is the big horse's advice.
No, I think that's a great shout. Thank you, everyone, for listening along. If you haven't, click subscribe. Make sure you listen to us on all our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and all that good jazz. This has been an absolute brilliant podcast alongside yourself, Mr. Big Horse, Mickie Dell. Always a pleasure. To everyone at home, be safe, take care, and we'll see you next time on the Insight Fantasy Sport Podcast. Peace out.
See ya.